Will Jim Phillips answer the difficult grant of rights questions regarding Florida State and Clemson?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Today's show is going to be fun as we talk about the grant of rights, hopefully getting some answers today from Jim Phillips, who takes to the mic at 1 p.m. But we are going to ask the questions here that I would love to know if he was actually going to answer at Media Days. That's next here on Locked On Seminoles. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make everything more with FanDuel as the playoffs wind down and the sports stop just a little bit before football season begins. FanDuel is still hooking up all its customers with a boost or a bonus each and every day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's not waste time here, man. This is one I've been excited about forever because I hate the legal jargon and all that. I like direct answers. Like most of you, I'm not the most patient kind of fella. And I understand Jim Phillips is in a rough spot because there's only so much he can say. The only thing that I will be completely critical of, and I mean, I will go off about this on this podcast, and there will be writers and other podcasts. They will hammer him. Fair or not. He's making a lot of money, so he's deal with it. Is if he just tries to use the following comment in some capacity, it can be worded differently. But because it's in court, I can't really answer that. If he uses that over and over again, the hammer shall drop. You have to, whether you want to or not, you have to give direct answers. Repeat, direct answers. Some of these questions that I'm going to have are ones I'm talking about. Now, somebody that says, what are you going to do to make this court case go away? Or something like there's ridiculous questions. I'm throwing those out. You got to use some common sense. But I have 6 questions. If I was at ACC Media Days and I had the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Phillips, these are the ones that I'd want. And again, direct answers. No coach speak, no lawyer speak, no commissioner speak, direct answers. So here we go. Number one, and this is the one that he probably has the best chance to answer without using anything besides his own gut. So let's dive in. How do you keep a good relationship with like Dabo Sweeney or Mike Norvell, the administration at any school, the lawyers, etc., that are involved with this? Because whether he wants to admit it or not, there's some kind of communication, whether direct, indirect, or both, with all these people and Jim Phillips. And you're going into another season of football. You're ready to start basketball. You have all the women's sports or the Olympic sports. How do you keep a relationship? Because you know that, like, just as an example, the Olympic sports, whether they want to admit it or not, they rely on this thing called football and basketball to pay the bills. Who's going to go in? Like, this is what I would want to know if I was the Clemson soccer coach. With all this going on, we're trying to sue you guys and all that, but we need to survive. In the meantime, how am I going to sell things to my fans? How are we going to get advertising? How are we going to do things short term that people want to be a part of if you guys are dragging this through the mud? Like, those are the kinds of questions they're going to get in some way, shape, or form. And I know I'm shortening a bit of a truncation, but I know that they're going to have those questions. He's got to answer them. So again, how do you keep a relationship with those schools? It's Florida State and Clemson's one thing, but Duke, Wake Forest, Boston College, Virginia, all those schools need to have information as well. How do you, A, give them an honest answer, and then B, how do you do it and not give away the inside? This hard part for Phillips, and that's why he makes a lot of money, that doesn't create information going to Clemson from one of the other schools. They're going to Florida State from one of the other schools. It's tough, but he has to do both somehow. That would be a fascinating answer because Jim is in a tough spot. If they do not keep a good relationship with everybody, and I do mean everybody, coaches, players, administrators, fans, booster clubs, all of that, while this is going on, which I know is darn near impossible, it will financially ruin the ACC as well as its teams and fan bases and all that, because you will see fewer advertisers. You will see people taking shots at them. Like, it's important how he answers this question. Somebody's going to ask it in some capacity, and he might even give a bit of a snippet in his opening remarks. That's my guess. I know I would, to try to truncate the opportunity for somebody to say something to me that is a difficult question that puts me in a spot. I would just get it out of the way. We'll see. Number two, to avoid this whole situation, what could have been done between the ACC and these schools to alleviate this? Instead of basically both being very stubborn, why hasn't there been some kind of buyout? Now, there's two main roads people are probably thinking of that are lawyers here. Number one, we don't want to, they're never going to admit the first one, but it's just 100%. They don't want it, like, let's say they're okay, Florida State, you can leave. The problem is once you open the door, it's a precedent, and in law, precedent is everything, then the whole week's gone. They will lie on their grandmother's grave that that's not the answer, but that's the answer. Two, it's money. How much does he lie or ditch and dodge around that? Because the people that matter, the advertisers, don't want him to touch that question. If there is like the first question is pretty easy, you can be more honest about it. There's a little in between with not giving too much. I get that. But this one is hard. Somebody's going to ask that in some capacity. Again, what could the ACC and the schools in question, Florida State, Clemson, etc., have done to keep this from going to court? Just something to think about. Everybody has their own opinion, but that's something I would love to know. Number three, is it hard to work on future media rights deals with all this going on? I honestly have no idea how he would answer this. He's not going to just say we're getting hammered if they are. But if Jim is in a spot where, you know, they're working on a deal with a major manufacturer or maybe a company like Target or something like that, that's, you know, just somebody that you think of in mainstream retail, Goldman Sachs, whatever it might be, that's looking to advertise with one of the major college football brands, the conference in general. How do you negotiate that and keep money coming in good faith for the programs, especially the ones not trying to lead the ACC, with all this going on? Because one of the things I also guarantee this is going on, if you guys keep dragging this out with schools A and B, Florida State and Clemson, these advertisers are going to see this, all this negativity constantly over and over and over and over again. Why would they want to do business with us in the future after they leave? And it's a rightful question. I would be concerned if I'm Goodyear, if I'm Mercedes, you know, Citibank, it doesn't matter what it is. That's a rough question. Why would we want to do business where there's a constant stream of negativity? Good luck to Jim on that one, but I'm sure behind closed doors that question will be asked. And I guarantee you in some capacity, whether it's just a podcast host like myself here at Locked On Seminoles or somewhere else, there's going to be another one. So we're going to let you kind of think about that for a second. We're going to pick back up on these questions here on Locked On Seminoles, but Jim Phillips is definitely going to have some tough questions to answer. Coming up next, we'll get to him again. All right. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't really sportsing like we want them to be. FanDuel still has me and everybody else at an opportunity to get what they want. All you have to do is open up the FanDuel app and dream up bets at any time that somebody's in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Let's dive right back in. This is a fun question. What can the ACC do before Florida State and Clemson leave? At some point they are. Let's say the next 3 years, 4 years, something like that. Just whatever one you want to use. What can the ACC do in lieu of the last question that I asked about how's it going to work long-term for us with trying to get new advertisers, new revenue streams? You know, Boston College, Virginia, and these schools are going to ask, hey, what's going on? In conjunction with that, we need to know this. We need to know how in the world are we going to come up with some extra short-term revenue to make up this gap that the Big Ten and the SEC have on us? I mean, it's a fair question. It's an open-ended question. Again, Jim Phillips makes a lot of money. He's a very intelligent man. But does he have an answer for that? I do not envy him. And it's not like he can give it away, but I'm sure they're trying to do something. Are there going to be, for example, a one-year goal with a handful of major advertisers, or it's a rolling contract as long as you can use language such as long as Clemson and Florida State are in the league, something like with football. Are you going to find extra revenue streams, maybe smaller ones? That's fine. It's the sum, the total, the end all be all bottom line that matters. So if you got to do 10 smaller deals to help make up if you're losing out on some other major opportunity with an advertiser, what are you doing to set a standard for the soccer team at NC State or whatever? It's not just football and basketball here, but with Florida State and Clemson teeter-tottering on being out of the league, we need to know. And then, of course, Florida State and Clemson still want to know that in the short term too, because they are trying to make it easier for their Olympic sports, while football and basketball aren't getting the same media money. They're not getting the same opportunities to win and therefore help their other sports. It is complex. I'm curious on that one, just because it's such a big, broad question. He can go in a number of directions. I expect a pretty good answer from Phillips, but what I want more than anything else is detail with names of companies. Give me something tangible to think about. Again, is it Citibank? Is it a local, like in the Carolinas, Food Lion is a major company. I don't know, whatever it is, but something like that with a grocery store like Food Lion. They need to have something that they're going out of their way to get extra revenue for them, because especially after Florida State, forget about Florida State and Clemson for a second. The school's staying, they need these, because when those two leave, there'll be like a year or two in between. It's going to be ugly for them. They need to be able to answer that. And in the meantime, they might be able to have better relationships if they can add those with Florida State and Clemson. These are really important. Now, the next question is the one that with all this, somebody's just got to ask. And he's going to do everything he can to get away from it, but there's no way around it. I've waited on this question for a while. I don't need to look at my notes. It's the number one question for me and every Florida State fan, Clemson fan, NC State, North Carolina, whatever. What is the timeline to get something done here? I know you're not the judge in any of these three court cases, but is there a way to A, come to a conclusion and just part ways? Or B, is it just that obvious, forest for the trees, and you guys are trying to drag this out as long as you can to keep the money that you have going in your direction, and it is what it is? If Jim gives the baloney corporate answer, this is another one where I will go off. Is it a baloney corporate answer, meaning, well, we have to wait for the courts and deflect, 10 big words and a couple of paragraphs later, deflect. That's what I'm worried about. There has to be a goal and a timeline. He can't tell me they haven't talked about that on the ACC side of things. No way in the world. That's one of the first things they're going to do, because come hell, come high water at this point, you're going to see Florida State and Clemson leave. They know that. Acting in any way, shape, or form, communicating it, body language, anything, saying that that's not going to happen at this point is a faulty statement. We know it. So does the other media members. You need to be honest. The only way to be honest about it is to hit it head on. If we could get something settled in the next 5 years, it'd be great. Whatever, a number, like something that you can look at on a piece of paper, something you can see in your mind that's clear. This indecision stuff is not good for, heck, even for my podcast. It's hard for me to comment on it because they just say, it's in court in this case and it's in this state. It's annoying. Everybody hates it. Give us some timelines of some kind on what can be done. And are you having consistent negotiations about a possible buyout? Maybe that's the best way to say it. Maybe let's just go with that. Instead of timeline, Mr. Phillips, are you having discussions and helping represent the ACC in negotiating a buyout with Florida State and Clemson? Yes or no? That's the most important question at the end. You might want to lead up to that. If the first person at the event was a Clemson writer, for instance, and just threw that out there, Jim, would you be nice enough to tell us what the buyout situation looks like for Clemson and Florida State. That might be a little aggressive, but at some point he's going to have to answer that. Maybe again that he'll give us something. You never know in his opening remarks. That would be wonderful. I have no idea because this is unprecedented. There's no way for me to project it, but that's something he might do. Timelines are hard, and I know he's under stress not to give too much, but if he doesn't, again, he's going to get hammered, absolutely hammered by people, and he's going to get, it's going to get to the point where, unfortunately, and I am not stating this should happen, but it will, him and his wife won't be able to go out to dinner. It's going to get ugly. People are going to want to know if there's no news by the end of this season, it's going to get really awkward. All right. This one, speaking of ugly, has he been spoken to by the ACC or Florida State or Clemson about potentially ending up in court? How do you prepare for that? There's all kinds of follow-up questions to it. How do you prepare to go into court? What do you know, etc.? I'm not going to go into speculation there because if I was Jim Phillips or anybody in the ACC office for that matter, Lord have mercy, I would not want any part of that. It's boring, it's dull, and it's also very complicated and can kind of tarnish your legacy. I don't have anything against Jim, and I really doubt any Florida State fans do, but the ACC is who he represents. Right now, they're the enemy. So he's caught between the crosshairs, and that's the way it is. So if he's going to testify, like, what is he trying to do or something like that, or maybe even to speak on the behalf of, at some point, I'd imagine they're going to ask for something from it. Maybe he just has to turn over documents. There's a million ways they can do it. Court is complicated, but this could get ugly. Will he be willing to kind of divulge what that's like in preparation? Because this is a very unique and landmark case in college athletics. Finally, what do you think about this case? Like, what have you learned from it? What has it taught you as a commissioner? This is more of a fun one that would make it a little bit easier for not only you, the ACC, Florida State, Clemson, etc., but for people to learn from this. Sure, Florida State, Clemson signed a contract, but what could have been done in the meantime? What can be done next? So many directions Jim could take this kind of question. What are we learning from this scenario? Because let's be honest, now that the ACC has been sued, there's no reason to believe there won't be other schools being sued, and quite honestly, rather soon if they don't like their media rights deal. It is what it is. People want the most money they can get. That's what litigation is about most often. Fair or not, that's true. I'm curious if he can give any feedback, any education, maybe even be honest, say, I should have done something. Maybe I should have suggested something. Maybe it's just, hey, what I'm talking about right now, giving the fans and media members a little more to chew on that's tangible instead of just speculation. Because Lord only knows I've speculated on it quite a bit and didn't even do a podcast because it's so dim in there. You can't see what's going on. This is a really, really great opportunity for Jim. If somebody says the ball was in your court here, what have you learned and what can we do better for anybody, whether it's the SEC, Big Ten, ACC in the future, to make things like this go away? I'm curious if Jim does anything. So by the way, I don't have any ill will for Jim, but he's going to have a tough day is my guess. I could be completely wrong, but there's going to be some tough questions. And I know I will personally hammer him if he does not. Again, I know I'm a little more impatient than most, but direct answers. If he wants to go with lawyer speak, I will drop the hammer. And so will the Charlotte Observer, and so will numerous other people. And it will be also obvious, this is very important, if there are newspapers or outlets that strongly favor Jim's comments, if he completely goes around things, you'll know they put in pressure, or place pressure, on those pieces of, I don't want to say journalism because it's not really journalism anymore, but that partisan concept that they write, it'll be obvious. If he goes out of his way and he doesn't answer anything, and then like 4 or 5 different ones, especially in the state of North Carolina, read through the North Carolina papers. Chapel Hill is a good example because they're the other school that's kind of rumored to have been looking at leaving the league. That's everything to the ACC because it's the basketball megastar. The Big Ten would love to get North Carolina. because, they got pretty good football. They're not great, but they got good football. It is the Max brand for like all things sport. They're good in a ton of different sports. What's going on with the Chapel Hill papers that, what's going on with North Carolina Student newspaper? And then again, the Charlotte Observer, something that goes on at Wake Forest, everybody's opinion. Let's see how partisan that is. Coming up next, I have a few comments about some of the coaches' selections for ACC Media Days. It takes place today on Monday, then on Tuesday, and then finally on Wednesday. ACC Media Days can be unique when it comes to all the different players that are coming in. Usually quarterbacks, etc. And I'll talk about quarterbacks here in a second. But sometimes it's senior, sometimes it's not necessarily a star, and coaches pick players. It's really unique. With that, quarterbacks this year in the ACC, and I'm looking at their page right now, they did a great job with this, kind of some stats, some points about quarterbacks to give an idea how the league's probably shortchanged a little bit and why some of these guys that are coming to ACC Media Days you should pay attention to. You'll learn a lot about some of Florida State's future opponents. Here are a few things that are kind of interesting that the ACC did on their page. And again, give them credit. This is on ACC.com. I'm just going to read this. So the ACC is a conference of quarterbacks. The returning starters are like Thomas Castellanos at BC. Florida State fans certainly remember him. Cade Klubnik at Clemson. Grayson Loftus started for Riley Leonard after he was injured for the rest of the year at Duke. You got Haynes King at Georgia Tech, Preston Stone at SMU, Kyron Drones at Virginia Tech. And then there are transfers: DJ Uiagalelei at Florida State, Tyler Show at Louisville, Cam Ward at Miami, Grayson McCall at NC State, and Kyle McCord at Syracuse, among others. It is a really deep year at quarterbacks. We're going to talk a little bit more about them in a second, but it is a really, really good group. The ACC has a top-ranked group of quarterback transfers by CBS Sports and by others, by the way. 13 quarterbacks in the league entered the 24 season with over 20 touchdowns and over 3,500 yards passing. That's a really high number. 8 quarterbacks from ACC schools are projected to start week 1 in the 2024 NFL season, 25% of the National Football League. Since 2018, the ACC has had at least one quarterback drafted in the first 5 rounds, the only conference to do so. So again, most of these schools, except for one, I'll talk about that in a second, are going to feature quarterbacks. So now I'm going to go through each school, and this is alphabetical, on who their coach is and who they're bringing. A few comments on each, and we'll just get out of here after that. But I find this stuff fascinating because you know who your leaders are, who the guys are you're going to count on by who you bring to Media Day. Bill O'Brien at Boston College. He was longtime assistant with the Patriots. He's been at Penn State, etc. Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback that's such a difficult player to tackle, he's bringing. And then he's bringing in defensive end, I'm going to butcher this name, Donovan Ezekiel from Williamston, New Jersey. He's also bringing in Drew Kendall, an offensive lineman. California head coach Justin Wilcox. Interesting, he's got Fernando Mendoza, a kid from Miami that's starting for Cal. That's a weird combo. Jaden Ott, from California. He's a really good football player. Chandler Rogers, another quarterback. That's unique. They got 2 QBs from Texas, and Craig Woodson from Grand Prairie, Texas as well. Dabo is bringing Barrett Carter, who's a dude at linebacker. He's bringing Klubnik, the quarterback. Phil Maffa, his big monster running back, kid out of the state of Georgia. And then R.J. Mickens, a kid that's a really talented player out of Texas, talented safety. He went with guys that are proven for him, not exactly shocked, based on Dabo's background. Head coach Manny Diaz at Duke, a little more offensive heavy than I thought he would because he's a defensive-minded guy. Grayson Loftus, quarterback. Jordan Moore, the kid out of Maryland, he's a receiver. Malik Murphy, the other quarterback kid at Texas, had last year that transferred. So maybe there's a chance that something's going to change there. He's got an offensive lineman and a safety as well. Of course, Norvell, I did a podcast about this. You can check out on Locked On Seminoles yesterday. Norvell, Joshua Farmer, Patrick Payton, Darius Washington, all kids from Florida, all linemen, all recruited out of the high school ranks. I think that is a very, very important way to put that. Georgia Tech head coach Brent Key, he's bringing Zeke Biggers, defensive lineman. Jamal Haynes, a really good running back from the state of Georgia. And then Haynes King, the transfer from Texas A&M. He's out of Longview High School in Texas, one of the best programs out there. Head coach Jeff Fromm, It was probably a little more difficult for him. They lost their quarterback. I'm not sold on Tyler Show, but you need to bring your QB so he's there. But he also brought in Quincy Riley, a good defensive back, and then Ashton Jawadi, the defensive lineman, who's a dude. That's a South Florida kid, really good football player. Louisville could be the fly in the ointment for a lot of teams. Mario Cristobal brought Francisco Maligoa. He's a kid that's really turned it up. He was a transfer from Washington State last year, had 7 sacks. Jalen Rivers, fifth-year senior offensive lineman, and then Cam Ward, a fifth-year senior quarterback transferred from Washington State. North Carolina head coach Mac Brown, he's got 5 guys. He's got, excuse me, Power Eccles, linebacker out of Charlotte. Marion Hampton, maybe the best running back in the ACC this year. He'll certainly be among them. He's got Connor Harrell. I'm not real sure if that's going to work out well. In Max Johnson, that's the biggest difference for Carolina. They're bringing 2 quarterbacks, but they just lost a top 5 pick. I'll believe it when I see it. And then Kamen Rucker is a really good pass rusher they have coming back as well. Dave Dorn at NC State. Grayson McCall, he's the transfer quarterback. I'm curious to see, he went from the FCS kind of level of competition, if you will, and I'm not picking on him, but Coastal's not a great program in terms of who they play. Now he's in the ACC with a lot more pressure. He's got Jordan Waters and he's got Davin Van. Waters, a running back, and Van Adine. They're both really good, but he didn't bring his young stud receiver who's only going to be a sophomore. That's interesting to me. Narduzzi, I never trust what that guy's doing because he thinks so much about running, but he didn't bring a defensive lineman. Didn't bring an offensive lineman. This is interesting. Gavin Bartholomew, a tight end. Donovan McMillan, a DB. He's a pretty good player. And Nate Yarnell, who needs a lot of work at quarterback. Good luck to them. I don't think they're going to be very good. Rhett Lashley at SMU. Kevin Jennings is a quarterback, and so is Preston Stone. It's interesting that he brought Jennings. Stones is their guy. It's not in question. Elijah Roberts is a kid they brought that's a defensive end, and they also brought in RJ Maryland, a tight end. So for them, no offensive lineman either. Stanford, Lord only knows they need help. They were awful last year, 3-9. Head coach Troy Taylor has Alec Ayaman. I can't even pronounce the kid's name. He's a wide receiver. Ashton Daniels, a pretty good quarterback out of Georgia. And Tristan Sinclair, linebacker out of Alamo, California. Syracuse head coach Fran Brown. LaQuint Allen, running back out of Millville, New Jersey. Justin Barron, DB out of Connecticut. And then a couple of kids from New Jersey. Theodore Diggs, who's really talented. He's a guy that I'm curious about. He transferred from A&M, if I remember correctly. And then Kyle McCord, who transferred from Ohio State. Brown's got maybe the most interesting press conference out of everybody. Kind of curious to see what he says. Virginia head coach Tony Elliott. He needs to win some games to keep his job. Chico Bennett, the defensive end. Cam Butler, the linebacker, and quarterback Tony Muskett. He only brought one of his quarterbacks. I'm curious about that. They were so up and down at that spot. Muskett was banged up a lot last year. Virginia Tech head coach Brent Pry. Kyron Drones, really good football player out of the Houston area. I think he's a guy that's on the rise, might even end up in the NFL. Antoine Powell-Ryland, the defensive lineman, and then Dorian Strong, a corner. So only 3 guys for him, but pretty good football players. Head coach Dave Clawson. This is the interesting one because there's no quarterback. It's the only school on the list that's not bringing a quarterback is Wake Forest, and they were terrible at that spot last year. But Jason Davis, a defensive lineman out of Georgia, Devontae Gordon, an offensive lineman out of D.C., and Taylor Moore, a wide receiver out of the state of Virginia. Not sure what to expect out of them, but they weren't very good last year. So out of the teams in the ACC, one didn't bring a quarterback. It's Wake. So again, to summarize, I'm curious to see what the ACC's Commissioner Jim Phillips does. He has some tough questions that I would ask. And by the way, it's up to the ACC media to put themselves in the crosshairs because he might snap back at some of the questions. I don't know, Jim. I don't know what he's like. Too bad, do it anyway. If you're going to be there, you made the trip, make it worth your while. And there's ways to give him softball tosses on this too. He's an experienced man. It's not easy to get him just to come out with a bunch of stuff, but we need direct answers. Will we get them? That's something to think about. Anyway, please like and subscribe. rate and review this podcast, and do make sure you share it. Truly appreciate you all coming in to make this your first listen each and every day. Part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Y'all have a great one. I will talk to you soon.